I can't hear anything. Can you guys hear? Okay.
I'm hearing some talk back.
All right, good evening, everyone. Today is November 3rd, 2020. The time is 6 p.m. This is the City of Georgetown, Texas Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. At this time, I would ask Myrna Garcia, our staff liaison, to call the roll so we can officially establish which commissioners are in attendance. Myrna?
Aaron Albright. He will not be attending. Cherie Heinzman.
Here.
Kayla McCord.
Here.
Marlene McMichael.
Here.
Travis Berthius.
I am here.
Jay Warren.
Yes, ma'am.
Ursel Brashear.
Here. Okay, so we have 6 members here this evening. So we have a quorum. And welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Commission members are appointed by the mayor and the city council for the purpose of reviewing land use applications. For some of those applications, the commission will be the final authority. For others, notably those items with zoning and annexation, commission acts as an advisory body and as such makes recommendations to the city council for their final determination. Tonight's meeting is being held as a teleconference. The complete agenda and all supporting documentation for each of the items to be dealt with this evening has been posted on the city's website and is available for public review. In a few moments, Matt Wagner will walk us through the process of how all parties can participate in this teleconference meeting. The agenda for tonight's meeting is divided into 3 sections: a regular session agenda, a consent agenda, and a legislative regular agenda. As to the consent agenda, any items that the director considers routine and non-controversial, or any items that don't require a public hearing, are grouped together and can be decided by a single motion. That being said, any item on the consent agenda can be moved to the legislative regular agenda for a full presentation and discussion by the commission, by either commissioner or members of the public. So prior to taking any action on the consent agenda, I'll ask if commissioners have any items that they want to abstain, or if they have items they want to pull from the consent agenda and have moved to the legislative regular agenda. After that, I'll ask if any member of the public has any items on the consent agenda that they want pulled and moved to the legislative regular agenda, so those items can be discussed publicly and acted upon individually. As to the legislative regular agenda, each item listed for action will be discussed and acted on individually. The process we will follow this evening is at step 1. I will announce the agenda item and the file number for the item being considered. Step 2, city staff will begin by reading the caption for the item for the record, and then make a presentation to the commission and the public. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the commission then will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff regarding the item. Step 3, after the commissioners have completed their question for staff, the applicant will be given up to 5 minutes to make a presentation to the commission, so that should they so desire. The commission will then have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. At the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, I will then open the floor for public comments. If you're here this evening to address the commission, we ask that you please begin your comments by stating your name and address for the record. Speakers will have up to 3 minutes to address the commission. Unless another person present and signed up to address the commission is willing to transfer their time to you, in which case an individual speaker may have up to 6 minutes to address the commission. After everyone who has signed up to address the commission has spoken, the public hearing will be closed. Step 5, the applicant will be provided up to 3 minutes of rebuttal time to respond to the public comments, if they so choose. Step 6 will be discussion of the item, then moves to the dais, and the commissioners will engage in the deliberation process with the goal of adopting a formal action on the item. That being said, let's start with Nat. Welcome. If you would walk us through the process by which the meeting will be conducted this evening, I'd appreciate it.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and those in the audience. Thank you for your time tonight. Sophia asked me to share a couple of administrative notes on how the meeting will be run through Zoom. You each should have a mute function through your computer. We ask that you keep yourself on mute until you're ready to speak. If you're participating by phone, I'd also ask that you turn your phone to mute until you're ready to speak. When you are ready to speak on the item, please make sure that you state your name clearly, both your first and your last name, so we can take accurate minutes and all in attendance will know who is speaking. For the commissioners, if you're having any technical difficulties, I have my work cell phone ready and charged. The number, if I could share that with you, in case you get disconnected, I'll also put it in the chat function tonight so you can dial it and I will be monitoring it. My number on my cell direct to me is 512-779-3531. I'll put that in the chat, but again, my cell phone number, should you get disconnected, is 512-779-3531. With some of this technology, we do know that sometimes people's signals get dropped. So we just ask for your patience. We will work with the chair if we lose a member tonight and have difficulty getting them back on. You have my cell phone. We'll try and work it out to get you back into the meeting. We'd ask for your patience before we move forward on that item. Make sure we have all the commissioners present. Applicants, we know some of you are here this evening. One of you or several of you may have presentations to make tonight. What we'd ask you to do is to please raise your hand. There is a function in Zoom where you can raise your hand to notify me that you are here and ready to make a presentation when your item comes forward. You can also use the chat function to chat me directly. That's Nat Wagner, or you can put a general chat out there and I will be monitoring it and making sure that the chair is aware that you are here and ready to present. For public comment purposes, we'll start first with those who are on the phone. We do have, we had earlier some people joining us by cell phone. So we'll start with those first if they wish to speak on an item. Then we'll go to those who raise their hands in the function of Zoom. And then lastly, I will continue to monitor the chat for those who put a message in the chat to speak towards an item. And any public comments that have been submitted tonight, we will read them into the record. Myrna will do that for us. Appreciate you hanging with us in this technology challenges. Again, please call me if you need anything, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. That takes us to our item A, which is our first item, and that's public wishing to address the board. The city of Georgetown has a standard practice in which it provides an opportunity for any citizen to address any board or commission at any regularly scheduled meeting on any item that's not an agenda item. To address the board, you need to reach out to board liaison. In this case, that would be Myrna, at least a week ahead of our scheduled meeting so that you can get your item listed and you can then have an opportunity to address the board. At the time of this posting, we have no persons who've signed up to speak. So we're going to move to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda consists of items B through Q. These were items that were deemed to be non-controversial and routine. and can be acted on a single vote. Commissioners, let's start with you. Do you have any items on the consent agenda that you wish to abstain on? Not hearing anyone. Commissioners, do you have any items you want to pull and move to the legislative regular agenda? Not hearing anyone. Are there any members of the public who are here this evening that have any items listed on the consent agenda that you want to have pulled and moved to the legislative agenda? Not seeing or hearing anyone. Commissioners, as to the consent agenda, the floor is open to a motion.
Reversal is J. I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented by staff.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Ursula, this is Sheree. I move to second the motion.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All right, Myrna, call the roll, please.
Sheree Heinzman,
Yes.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes. So the motion carries 6-0 with Commissioner Albright absent. Thank you. That takes us to our legislative regular agenda. This evening we have 1, 2, 3, 4 zoning applications in front of us. Of those 4, 3 have generated 0 comments or public responses, those being item R, S, and U. And with the commission's approval, I would like to move those out of the way first, since item T is one that will generate more comments. So anyone have any objection to that, us following that sequence? All right, if not, then we'll start with item R. And this is file number 2020-17-REZ. Ethan, good evening.
Good evening. Item R is a public hearing and possible action on a request to rezone 7.51 acres out of the LJ Dykes survey, abstract number 180, from the industrial zoning district to the general commercial zoning district. On the property generally located at the southeast corner of IH-35 and Blue Springs Boulevard. Like the caption mentioned, the property we're discussing this evening on item R is approximately 7.5 acres and sits right there where Blue Springs Boulevard meets I-35. We're about 4/10 of a mile short of the intersection of the I-35 service road, where it splits off to intersect with Austin Avenue and Interloop and the new Southwest Bypass. If you've driven around here, you may remember that this is the field where a longhorn used to sit. A longhorn had a really clever name. There was a pun on being a longhorn, but I can't remember what he was called. But if you're driving down the interstate, you probably don't exit here. If you're coming to central Georgetown, you probably take a few exits up. And so you'll know the office building on the north has a few insurance companies located inside of it. You'll know the manufactured home sales lot there to the south. And then of course, you'll recognize the railroad where cars sit outside the quarry. All of the property to the east of this is essentially undeveloped. I can get my slide to change. And it really sits at the edge of what is an employment center. So you can see here that on one side of Blue Springs Boulevard, we have the employment center designation. And on the north side, you have that regional center designation. The subject property itself is currently in our industrial zoning district, but it's also worth noting and that's within our Highway Gateway Overlay District. That overlay district provides some additional standards for landscaping there, and then how that landscaping should be placed to eventually, as properties develop, create a unified, cohesive look as you drive down the interstate. Yeah, so that employment center designation is one that you've seen here before. This is where we really are promoting our large-scale employment uses, office parks, different types of industrial or manufacturing warehousing uses, and those uses that may support those. So those could be high-density residential development, or that could be commercial development that provides services that either employees want during the day or that provide supporting services to those businesses that are within these locations. The applicant tonight is requesting our general commercial zoning district, which is our zoning district that primarily supports those larger scale and more intense commercial uses. It's very similar to our local commercial zoning district, but here you will see less restrictions on the size of uses, such as restaurants. You'll even see more of those auto-related uses like fuel sales, convenience stores, that sort of a thing. And generally, this is one of our most permissive zoning districts. You can have everything here from a strip center that provides, services like a hair salon, retail, or restaurant, or you could see those more intense uses like the auto-related uses, and even some things permitted with an SUP, like manufactured housing sales, flea markets, recreational vehicle sales, or multifamily, like you'll see later tonight with the SUP. So in general, when we reviewed this request against our 5 approval criteria, we found that number 1, the applicant gave us everything we needed to review the request. Number 2, we found that while this request doesn't specifically meet the primary uses we encourage in the employment center, that general commercial zoning district still permits uses on the 7.5 acre site that could be similar in scale to those employment center uses, and that would provide services that complemented those employment center uses. This would not be totally incompatible with the adjacent uses, and it would definitely complement the rest of the employment center. This property is at a key location, the intersection of 2 major collector roads and a freeway. So this is definitely a gateway into this area. The third thing we found was that this provides appropriate uses at this location. This is a zoning district that can support uses that generate lots of traffic. And here with frontage on 3 overall transportation plan roads, this is a logical place and a safe place to put this use. Like I mentioned before, most of the property around the subject property is undeveloped. But thinking about our future land use plan, we feel that this sets an appropriate character and tone for the property as it develops further. Of course, when you're proposing a general commercial zoning district adjacent to completely undeveloped property, although the property to the south has developed that manufactured housing sales use, it won't comply immediately, but as we look at our long range plan and its location here along I-35 and similar developments that are sporadic there along I-35, it's similar in scale and in character. And the last thing we looked at was the suitability of the property. This property is generally flat. It has no real natural features that would prohibit development. One man-made feature, though, that would limit development is a Georgetown utility easement that bisects the property diagonally. In that easement, there are some overhead power lines, but this applicant has already begun to work with the electric utility to move those lines or relocate that easement so they can develop the property in the manner they wish. We did notify 5 adjacent property owners, and we did post notice in the Sun newspaper on October 18th, and we did post signs on the property. But to date, we've received no comments or phone calls about this case. This is a public hearing and possible action to rezone 7.5 acres from the industrial zoning district to the C3. I'm available for questions as well as the applicant. We also have a concept plan that was left out of the agenda packet, and those referenced in the applicant's letter of intent, if y'all would like to see that. But we're here for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ethan. Commissioners, any questions for Ethan regarding this application? Okay, hearing none. Is the applicant present? Does the applicant wish to make any comments?
I am present. No comments to be made. This is Bob Demian.
Okay, Mr. Denman, did you bring the sketch or a schematic of the proposed layout? Thank you.
Ethan has it right there.
All right, thank you. It was included in your letter of intent or referenced in your letter of intent. So appreciate your sharing that with us. Any questions from commissioners to the applicant? All right, not hearing any, then I'm going to open the public hearing. If there's anyone here this evening that would like to address this matter, now's your time to do so. I'm not seeing any hands raised in the Zoom meeting. Has anyone signed up to speak? All right, not hearing anyone, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, this moves to us. At this point in time, the floor is open to a motion.
This is Kayla McCord. Move to recommend approval of the requested rezoning.
Okay, so this is a recommendation to go to council to recommend approval.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Travis. I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any discussion on this item? Okay, if not, Myrna, call the roll, please.
Sherry Heinzman,
Yes.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Perthius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, so the motion carries 6-0 with Commissioner Albright absent. Thank you very much. That takes us to item S. This is file number 2020-18-REZ. Andreana, this would be you this evening.
Good evening, Commissioner. Just to confirm, is everybody able to see my screen? It should
Yes.
say 206 is Janice. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, as stated, the item that's before you tonight is a request for a rezoning of a property that's approximately 0.1 acre property, or about just a little bit over 4,500 square feet, out of the Nicholas Border Survey, from the Townhome Zoning District to the General Commercial District. And this piece of property is generally located along 206 East Janice Drive. And as you can see in the screen in front of you, the subject property that's in question and subject to the rezoning tonight is highlighted in red. And you may actually recognize this property. This portion of the property is actually currently right now part of a larger, just over 3 acre property, which comprises of all of this area. And you may find it familiar because this actually went through the rezoning process not too long ago, where this property was rezoned into the Townhome Zoning District. And so now the property owner, as they're furthering the proposal for the project and laying out their proposed subdivision, they are wanting to essentially be able to sell this property to the property to the north, which is currently zoned general commercial. And so the request for the rezoning is to be able to make this portion of the property consistent with the remainder tract of land. But we'll go that into a little bit more detail. And as you can see here, this property is currently vacant, and it is surrounded by a mix of uses ranging from multifamily to attached single family to an established single family neighborhood, as well as some commercial development that you'll find that's going to be closer along Northwest Boulevard in the I-35 frontage road. It is currently within our special area future land use destination, which this is a future land use destination that was created and revised and amended with the 2030 plan update to really be able to promote areas where you have an integration of a mix of uses, both residential and non-residential, where special care is being taken care of on the built environment. And so within this special area, this property is actually located also within the Williams Drive Gateway Plan. In the Williams Drive Gateway Plan, that also became part of the 2030 plan through its update earlier this year, makes further recommendation on future land use destination for this property. And then for this particular area, it makes a recommendation of high density mixed housing. And so the high density mixed housing, it really encourages more of a variety of higher intense residential zoning types of development. And it also encourages a transition between your single family residential neighborhood to that high density residential neighborhood with a mix of 80% residential and 20% non-residential. And so with this property, as mentioned, it is currently zoned townhome district because it was made part of that. It was originally part of that larger 3-acre property that was recently rezoned townhome. And as you can see here, it is surrounded by that townhome district as well as the general commercial zoning district, which is the zoning district that the applicant is requested to rezone it to. You can see other zoning districts within the area. We have high density multifamily. You have your traditional single family residential zoning district. And then you have, again, more general commercial zoning district along the Rivery Boulevard on the other side. And so the general commercial zoning district that the applicant is requesting is really intended to be able to allow for uses, commercial and retail serving uses that tend to not just be able to serve the surrounding community and area, but also the region in a greater scale. And so because of that, it is a zoning district that's typically appropriately along arterial roadways and freeways. You can see here in the blue box, and I know that Ethan went over this at the previous presentation, but you see here the setback requirements, for that zoning district. But I also want to focus on the additional setback requirements that apply when that zoning district, it does abut a residential zoning district or development, including the buffer yard requirements that would be applicable in those situations. Some of the permitted uses that you see here in the general commercial district include dry cleaning services, farmers market, fitness center, social service facility. Some uses that are permitted with limitations include driving ranges, event facilities, and then some of the uses that would require approval of a special use permit include auto repair uses, bus barns, lumber yards. So those are the types of uses that would require approval from the city council in order for them to be able to occur on this property. And so staff reviewed the approval criteria and it found that it complied with the majority of the criteria, but partially complied with a comprehensive plan. And so we found that we did have a complete application and therefore we're able to do the review. We found that it was partially consistent and it partially complied with the comprehensive plan. The reason for that is because, as you may recall, the future land use destination for this area is a future land use destination that primarily encourages a high mix of high density residential types of uses. And while it does also encourage a mix of commercial at a lower percentage, if you may recall, there's that 80 to 20% ratio. We found it that while this rezoning this small piece of property does not deviate or make any sort of impact on the existing ratio that exists today, because there is a lot of already commercial zone properties within this area. It is something that it's furthering promoting or furthering allowing the commercial that's already allowed today. So it's not going to allow any additional commercial, but it just allows for that commercial that exists today. And I apologize for missing the X here, but staff did found that this zoning change does promote the health, safety, or general welfare of the city, as well as a safe and orderly and healthful development. And the reason for this is because, as discussed, this small piece of property is going to become part of the property to the north that is currently already zoned general commercial. And so by making sure that a property has a single zoning district throughout, that helps promote that orderly development, because then we are able to apply consistent development standards across the entire property and not, and not run into any conflicts or issues that we may run into when, a single property has multiple zoning districts. In addition to that, we did found that it was compatible with the present and conforming uses of the surrounding area. And again, that is because, the property that this piece of property will become a part of is already zoned general commercial. And so it's compatible with that. But we also see that there's a lot of the surrounding properties are already zoned general commercial, or are zoned local commercial, or are zoned some other type of a high density zoning district that is considered to be generally appropriate when located next to the general commercial zoning district. And then the property to be rezoned is suitable for the uses permitted by the district. Again, because this property is going to become part of a larger property, and it's not going to be a standalone property. That property as a whole, with the addition of the property to the north, is definitely big enough to be able to accommodate those uses that are permitted in the general commercial zoning district. As required by our ordinances and state law, all property owners within 300 feet of the subject property were notified of the request, as well as notices put in the place in the newspaper and on site. And to date, staff has not received any comments in opposition or in favor of the request. And so in summary, this is again a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 0.104 acre from the townhome zoning district to the general commercial zoning district. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I believe the applicant is also available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. We appreciate the presentation. Commissioners, any questions to staff on this application? All right, not hearing any. If the applicant wishes to address the commission, now's the time to do so.
No comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant from commissioners? All right, not hearing any. This is a public hearing, so let me open the public hearing and ask if there are any members of the public who are here this evening that would like to address the commission. Now's the time to do so. I'm not seeing any hands raised in our Zoom board. Anyone signed up from the city side? All right, not seeing or hearing anyone. I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, what is your recommendation to the city council?
Ursula, it's Jay. I recommend that we approve it as presented by staff.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the application as presented by Commissioner Warren. Do I have a second?
This is Marlene McMichael. I second.
Thank you, Marlene. All right, so commissioners, we have a motion to approve the application, or to recommend to the council approval of the application as submitted. Any discussion? Myrna, call the roll, please.
Sherry Heinzman,
Yes.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Perthius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, so the motion carries 6-0 with Commissioner Albright absent. Thank you. Now we're going to jump item T long enough to go knock item U out. So let's do it, and let's go to that. And I have this is going to be file number 2020-SUP. Andrea, this will be yours.
Andrea, you're on mute.
Thank you. Very important for that. All right. So yes, as stated,
Just a
this
second.
item.
Andrea, just a second before you get started here. I'm getting some feedback, and I think I have Mr. Heap's phone is unmuted. Could I get you to mute that, please, sir? Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, go ahead, please.
Right, not a problem. So this is a request for a special use permit to allow the attached multifamily specific use in the general commercial zoning district on the property that's located just southwest of the intersection or Northwest Boulevard and the I-35 intersection. And this, so you may actually recognize this area as the rezoning case that we just heard is actually located on the other side of River Boulevard. So this particular property highlighted in red here, as you can see, it's towards the east of River Boulevard from the rezoning case that we just considered. And just as mentioned, south and to the west of that intersection of Northwest Boulevard and I-35. It is currently a vacant property, and it is surrounded by a mix of uses. Again, you have some commercial uses along Northwest Boulevard and I-35. This property is actually uniquely situated that it's immediately behind the two hotel properties that are located at that corner. And then you can see that there's some additional commercial properties along the I-35 frontage road. And then you have some more residential properties going further out to the east, east of the River Boulevard extension. And so this property as well is located within that special area, future land use destination that we previously discussed about. However, in this particular case, the Williams Drive Gateway Plan actually recommends the land uses of highway commercial. And the highway commercial is really more intended to be able to promote areas that are meant to be for retail and personal services, and some of your more high intense commercial types of uses. And so it provides for areas for that large scale retail amenities as discussed, and also promotes for some secondary uses, including institutional and civic uses within the area. The subject property, as discussed, is general commercial zoning district, and it is surrounded by that same general commercial zoning district, which is the zoning district that promotes for high intense and allows for high intense commercial uses that serve that region area. And so the what City Council has identified certain specific uses that it may be appropriate within those zoning districts, as you know, provided that certain conditions are able to be met. And so through the special use permit process, as you may recall, it gives the ability for the Planning and Zoning Commission to make recommendations, as well as for the City Council to impose additional conditions on that use to ensure, to be able to mitigate that the impact that that use may have on the surrounding areas. And so it's specifically for the attached multifamily use, the Unified Development Code already identifies certain types of limitations and conditions that this use has to comply with in order for it to be allowed and considered within the zoning district. And so some of those conditions include that the multifamily use has to be accessory and supportive to the surrounding commercial uses. It has the limitation that your impervious cover cannot exceed 50%. Limitations include that while the front setback allows you to be able to be the same as the base zoning district, which in this case is your general commercial zoning district, it has additional setback requirements for your side and your rear, especially when it is located abutting a residential zoning district. It allows your building height to be the same as your base zoning district. However, as you can see, it does provide and include additional standards for building separation requirements. And it also states that it has to comply, that multifamily use has to comply with the other design standards that we have in the code as it relates to building design, lighting standards, as well as common amenity requirements. And so this is the conceptual plan that has been identified and provided by the applicant. And this is a general depiction, a concept plan of how this use is proposed or can be developed on this site. As you can see, the subject property currently abuts an unimproved right-of-way, which you can see here along the north of the street. And that unimproved right-of-way is currently proposed to be developed as a driveway to connect to Northwest Boulevard. And so that way, this property may be able to be annexed to Northwest Boulevard. In addition to that, this property, as you can see, also has an existing connection, a shared driveway through the hotel property that's in here to the south, as viewing in this depiction of the property, that is able to provide additional access to the site from the I-35 frontage road. Looking at the conceptual plan, it is very consistent and in line with the character of how these other commercial properties have been developed, where you typically have a single building that is surrounded by your parking areas, your landscaping areas, and so forth. And so staff reviewed the request, against the approval criteria for a special use permit. And we found that it complied with the majority of the criteria. We found that the use is not going to be detrimental to the health, welfare, and safety of the surrounding neighborhood or its occupants. As discussed, this property is uniquely located where it's actually immediately behind two already developed commercial properties, and is able to be accessed from two major roadways. So because of that, we found that it's not going to be detrimental to the surrounding area. Staff found that this special use permit can comply with some conditions when it relates to the conceptual site layout, circulation plan, design, and so forth. Well, and the reason for that is because while staff found this conceptual plan to be consistent with the way that the commercial properties surrounding this property have been developed, it has similar circulation, it is harmonious with the character of those commercial properties. One of the things that we wanted to make sure is that one of those conditions in the Unified Development Code that exists today is that the number of units cannot exceed 24 dwelling units an acre. The applicant in their conceptual plan currently showing a little bit just over 40 units for this property. So we want to be able to make sure that the number of units are actually in line with what's allowed in the UDC. But also, let me go back here to the conceptual plan. As I mentioned, this driveway right here that you can see on the north of the screen is currently located in an unimproved right-of-way. The applicant is right now pursuing the possibility of abandoning this right-of-way so that then this becomes a private drive. The reason for that is because the right-of-way, this right-of-way it exists today because that was the original River Boulevard extension alignment. So when we first started looking at this overall area and when we first adopted the first redevelopment plans for the Williams Drive area, it was recommended that River Boulevard will extend through here and connect Northwest with Northwest Boulevard at this location. However, as you know, River Boulevard through the final designs and engineering was actually realigned. It was located further to the east. So this right-of-way no longer serves the purpose that it was originally intended for. So the applicant is looking at the possibility of abandoning this right-of-way and, as I mentioned, turning it into a private street. And so what staff recommends is that should that right-of-way actually be abandoned and become part of the property, yes, it's not only that this use may be able to encroach and that right-of-way may be able to be used as a multifamily use, but that in a stub to the east is provided in order for us to be able to promote an additional east-west connection as it is recommended by the Williams Drive Gateway Plan, which is one of the goals and the policies that plan established in order for us to be able to have an effective street network, but also effective connectivity throughout the entire plan area. In addition to that, we also found that this use does not negatively impact the existing uses in the area through the public infrastructure. This property is currently served by all of the public utilities and systems. And right now it has not identified that this use is going to impose any additional impact to those facilities than any other use that may be permitted by right in that zoning district. And same thing, we found that this use is not going to negatively impact the existing uses through the creation of noise, glare, fumes, and so forth. As this particular use will not create anything more than any other use that would be permitted by right in the C3 zoning district, as well as that this use would be subject to the noise ordinance and all the other nuisance ordinances that we have in the city code. 11 property owners were notified of the proposed special use permit, as well as signs posted on the property and in the newspaper. And today staff has received no comments in regards to the request. And so, as mentioned, this is a request for a special use permit to allow the attached multifamily use in the general commercial zoning district on the property located just southwest of the Northwest Boulevard and I-35 intersection. Just as a reminder, the Planning and Zoning Commission has the ability to be able to make a recommendation with conditions should they find that additional conditions are needed on the use to the City Council. And that concludes my presentation, and the applicant is also available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Andreina. Commissioners, do you have questions for staff on this item?
This is Kayla McCord. I do have one quick question. If to build this or to develop it with 48 units would require the abandonment of that one right of way, is that correct? Since it's less than 2 acres as it stands now.
Right. In order for them to be able to develop the full 48 units, they would need to be able to add additional land to obtain the 2 acres. From my understanding, just with the abandonment of the right of way, it won't get them exactly to the 2 acres, so they will still be limited to that 24 dwelling unit an acre from the code. So they won't be able to reach exactly the 48, but it would allow them to be able, gives them a little bit of wiggle room to, as long as they're within that density provision.
Okay, thank you.
So is this the city's right of way?
So currently, yes, this is it's dedicated public right of way.
So how did the dedication occur?
From my understanding, it was through via deed. The original plat showed it as proposed future right of way dedication, and then the dedication actually occurred via deed.
Okay. Could you go back to page 7 on your presentation? And talk to me again about this target ratio, because you have this statement that your target ratio is 100% non-residential inside the highway commercial overlay district. And this
Correct.
property falls within that that district.
Yes, sir.
And so how do we get to the point where we're looking at a multifamily product when we have a target of 100% non-residential use in this district?
Absolutely. No, thank you for that question. So yes, so this future land use designation does encourage 100% non-residential types of uses, which is the reason why in this particular case, it's one of the reasons I should say why in this particular case, we explored the special use permit process and not rezoning of the property, because the special use permit just allows an additional use on the property than all the other uses that are permitted in that zoning district. So the property is going to retain its general commercial zoning district, which means that that property will still be able to develop with any of the commercial uses that are permitted by right in that general commercial zoning district. So the classification of the property is not changing, it's remaining commercial. The special use permit, which has allowed this additional use to be able to be developed on that property. The other thing that I would mention is that as you can see here, while we do have the majority of those properties fronting I-35 were designated highway commercial, the reason for that is because since you have frontage and access from the frontage road, that is where the highway commercial is actually deemed to be appropriate, and that's where we definitely want to be able to see it. This is a unique property that actually doesn't really have frontage on that I-35 road, and it also located right next to that high density mixed housing. So when you look at both items and you're balancing both items, that's where we found that this use would still be appropriate at this location.
Okay, would you go back to the site plan that shows the layout of the property and its relationship to the 2 adjacent hotels?
Yes, so this is the property right here. And this is the boundary of the subject property with the property lines,
right.
Correct.
Let me ask my question, please. If you abandon the right of way on the north side of this property, what's its legal access to the roadway?
So it will have to remain legal access. So there's 2 options potentially that can occur. One of them would be is that if they're able to obtain all of this becomes part of the property, it will still retain that access from Northwest Boulevard. The other option could be potentially is that they may be able to replat the property and join with a hotel property where they may be able to have frontage on I-35.
But at this point, that's a driveway to I-35.
Correct. That is a driveway.
And would their permitting be predicated upon them delivering an access easement from the impacted property that agrees that they have access through the hotel site back to their property?
If they want to be able
I'm
to,
asking, how do we know? Yeah, how do we know that they have two access points?
so the applicant may be able to answer that question right now, but from my understanding is that this is an option for to be able to provide an access. They are able to enter into an agreement with that commercial property to be able to have some shared access. As far as for guaranteeing access to that site, if this right now, the guaranteed access is through the existing right of way. If that right of way is abandoned, they will be required at that time to ensure that they have access onto a public street before that right of way can go ahead and be abandoned.
So I guess my question is, are we jumping the gun here because we don't know that that right of way is actually going to be abandoned? And so can you tell me where we are in that process?
I know that to my knowledge, I know that that is a process that option is currently being explored. However, they don't have to abandon that right of way. They are not required to abandon that right of way. And this use is not contingent upon the abandonment of that right of way. This use
If they
can
don't
develop.
abandon it, they have to do a smaller project?
If they abandon it, the use will be limited to its current property configuration, property boundary, and based on that density that the UDC limits them to, they would have to do lesser units than what is shown in the conceptual plan.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for staff? All right. If the applicant is here, if you would like to address the commission, now is your opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much. This is Vincent Shaw with Place Designers. I really appreciate the lovely job that Adelina did in explaining everything. We have been working closely with both engineering and real estate to determine the situation that we're currently under because of the right-of-way of the past Rivery. And I think we've come up with a good solution. Fortunately for this particular property, it is also the Holiday Inn owners also own this property. So what we're doing is we're trying to do is obtain access through amended plat or a replat from that property to get frontage. Your question about abandoning the right-of-way that was the old Rivery, we definitely tried to explore that first. However, the Candlewood is owned by someone else who wasn't as cooperative as we liked. Therefore, because that was the first option, was to get them to help abandon the right-of-way so that we all can have the property back and then replat so that we have frontage. So it seems like we wouldn't even be able to move forward with right-of-way abandonment until we have some type of frontage in place. And that's why we're trying to make sure that we do all of those things so that all of those can be in compliance before we move forward with any type of site development plans so that the legal access is in place.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions for the applicant? I guess I will ask my question to you, Mr. Shaw, and that is that I wonder about the sequencing of events. That's really, I mean, I understand the need for the SUP, but if you don't know what's the resolution of the right-of-way abandonment that you're looking to accomplish, and you have multiple owners between you and 35, one of which happens to be, I guess, the applicant, and that applicant and that ownership can change. How do we lock in access for this property?
Those are valid questions and questions that we've asked many, many months ago. We've worked with multiple departments and they've all been extremely cooperative in trying to help us to come to a solution. Mr. Baird, Mr. Monk, as you know, Adelina has been an excellent help as well. It was determined that SUP was the very first thing we needed to determine to find out if the use could be permitted first. And then the next step would be a combination of amended plat and right-of-way abandonment kind of at the same time so that frontage is not taken away from this property. So it's not a landlocked property at any point in time. That's kind of our goal. And it seems like it's staff's goal as well.
Well, it's certainly my goal, and I can appreciate what you're trying to accomplish. So I appreciate you helping me understand why we're doing the SUP before we have these other factors worked out. And I guess if, well, that's for the commission to work out. So I appreciate that. Anybody else have any comments for the applicant? Okay, not hearing any. This is a public hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if anyone is here this evening that would like to address the commission on this item. Now's your opportunity to do so. Mr. Mongold, your hand is up.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Most certainly can. Welcome.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm in my office with the landowners.
Just a second.
Directly.
Just a second, Mr. Mongold. I need you to give me your name, address, and phone and name and address first, please, for the record.
Ken Mongold, 3201 South Austin Avenue, Georgetown, Texas.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you. I'm in my office currently with the owners of the property to the south. That would be the Ralph Stewart Inc. It's a 3-acre tract that directly abuts this applicant. And there's probably 2 to 3 questions. The first question would be, would this rezoning to multifamily affect the C3 standing? Does it limit in any way? This might be a question for the staff. Limit any way of a applicant requesting any type of site plan, flex industrial, flex commercial? Is there any type of anything that would happen that would make it harder to permit to the south because it went multifamily?
This is a public hearing, and so we're here to hear your comments, but we can't actually engage in dialogue with you. But I do think it's a legitimate question, and I would encourage you to talk to staff between the time of this meeting and the council.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess the other question would be, a comment that they have is, do they lose access? It's a question, but they would probably not want to lose access to any easement that was dedicated in the past that abuts their property. I think that would be a question that they may have, or a comment, I guess we'll say, to the board, the commission.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment?
No other comment. Is that
Okay,
else?
thank you, Mr. Mongo. Appreciate you being here this evening. Anyone else that's here this evening to address the commission on this item? Not seeing or hearing anyone else, then I'm going to close the public hearing and give the applicant a chance to respond to the comments if he would like to. All right, not hearing anything. Commissioners, this moves to us. What is your recommendation to the city council?
Ursula's J, move to approve as presented by.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Warren to approve. Do I have a second?
Kayla McCord, I second.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion and a second. Let's, before we act on this, I would like to have a little discussion here. And that there are a recommendation for any conditions to this item. Either Jay or Kayla, do you have recommendation? Because the application as it's drafted right now is just to approve the SUP as submitted. Do you have specific recommendations as to access or any of those other items? And Andrea, I'd like you to come back and talk to the things that you saw as items that could potentially be included as part of this, the conditions for the SUP.
No, absolutely. Sure. Thank you for that. So really staff only identified 2 potential conditions. One of them is, and again, this is already in the UDC. The UDC does not allow for this use to be able to exceed the 24 dwelling units in acre provision. However, we just wanted to make sure that this is written and included in the ordinance because of the conceptual plan being, showing that 48 unit count. So in order to make sure that there are no conflicts or discrepancies, this is really more just establishing that condition in the ordinance to make it clear that the use has to follow what's already required by the UDC. The other condition, as I mentioned, access to to this current property can be provided and can exist through the existing right-of-way. It would just mean that the applicant would be required to improve that right-of-way in order to be able to access that property. So because the applicant is exploring the option of abandoning that right-of-way, the condition that we would like to add is that should the right-of-way be abandoned, is that and become part of this property, is that an additional driveway stop be provided to the property to the east in order to be able to have an additional connection. But as I mentioned, this use is not contingent upon the abandonment of the right-of-way. This property can be developed with that right-of-way already existing. It would just require the improvement of that right-of-way to be able to have access from Northwest Boulevard. And so those are the only 2 conditions. It's clarifying that the unit limitation under the UDC, and also clarifying or adding the condition that should the right-of-way be abandoned, yes, that right-of-way portion may become part of the property. It may be used as part of that multifamily use, but that an additional driveway stub be provided to the property to the east.
Okay, that helps me understand it. And Jay, when you say that you made the motion to approve as presented, I think it would be.
Okay, then let's do this, Ursula. Let's say I motion that we approve as presented by staff with staff's conditions.
This SUP conditions.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Kayla, do you agree with that? Kayla?
Yes, I do. I apologize.
All right. Any discussion, commissioners? Myrna, call the roll, please.
Sherry Heinzman,
Yes.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael, Marlene,
Yes.
Travis Perthius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, so the motion carries 6-0 with Commissioner Albright absent. Thank you. That takes us to item T. And that is case number 2020-19-REZ. Adriana, good evening.
Good evening. Okay, so in front of you, we have another zoning map amendment request. And this time is to rezone approximately just a little bit under 86 acres from the agriculture zoning district to two zoning districts. We have the general commercial district for approximately 7.6 acres and the industrial zoning district for approximately 78 acres. And this is going to be for the property that's generally located just south of the intersection of I-35 and the 130 tollway, as you can see on the exhibit in front of you. And so you can also see here the general locations of the two proposed zoning districts. The 7.6 acres that's being proposed to the general commercial is generally located along the north end of the property, along the I-35 frontage road. And then the rest of the property, so all of its southern portion, and also including the frontage along the 130 tollway, it's the 78 acres that's being proposed for that industrial zoning district. And so this property is currently vacant, primarily vacant. It is also surrounded by some vacant undeveloped property, as you can see, particularly along the 130 tolled roadway and a little bit along I-35. But it also abuts, you may recall the Volvo commercial truck sales center and service center that it's located along I-35. We also have an established industrial park just located just south of that. And then you have the Crystal Knoll residential neighborhood that abuts this property along its southern edge. And so this property is located within the regional center future land use destination. And as you can see here, it is also surrounded towards its north, east, and west by that same regional center future land use destination. You can also see some employment center future land use destinations also located along this section of the city on the other side of the I-35 frontage road. And the regional center is really, intended to be able to promote for areas of large scale commercial development. It's regional commercial. It's meant to, serve not just the immediate neighborhood and the immediate surrounding areas, but also the greater region as a whole. And so because of this, it promotes for that ratio of 75% non-residential, 25% residential, where you can have some high density residential as being the supporting uses to the regional commercial uses that is typically encouraged within this area. And so the property, as discussed and mentioned, is currently zoned agriculture zoning district, which is the default initial zoning district that is established when property is annexed. But it is also surrounded by some industrial zoning district, particularly in that established industrial park that you see here located towards its east. You have some general commercial zoning district along the frontage road. Across I-35, you can also see some general commercial and industrial based districts. As you may recall, this is the Costco property, the Whole Cat property. And then we have some ETJ property, established residential neighborhood that does not have any zoning district because it's currently in the ETJ. But you can also see that we have some residential zoning along the inner loop frontage road. And so the general commercial zoning district that the applicant is requesting for a portion of their property, as discussed, it's really meant to be able to serve commercial and retail uses that can serve the entire community. And because of this, it's considered to be appropriate along arterials and freeways. You can see here in the blue box the development standards of that zoning district. You can also see how those setbacks and buffer yard requirements actually increase when this zoning district abuts residential property. Some of the uses, as discussed in the previous rezoning cases of tonight, that are permitted in that district include car wash.
All right, are we all still here?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I apologize for that. So some of the permitted uses include hotel care services, so forth. Some uses that may be permitted with limitations include commercial recreation, fuel sales, data center, and then some of those uses that would require approval of a special use permit include auto-related uses, a bus barn, the flea market, and so forth. The industrial zoning district that the property is also requesting for the rest of the property, the remainder of the property, is really intended to be able to allow uses that are manufacturing warehousing, industrial activities in nature. And so they do, these are also uses that are very highly intense in nature, and they do tend to generate a lot of traffic, including traffic with heavy vehicles. And because of this, it's also considered to be a zoning district that is appropriate to be located along arterial and freeways. And because of its high intense nature, it's typically not encouraged, nor is it found appropriate to be adjacent to residential uses. However, as you can see here in the blue box, you can see the zoning districts of that property. And you can see that those, just like with the general commercial zoning district, the setback provisions, particularly the side and the rear setbacks, do increase when that industrial district does abut a residential development. You can also see that we even have a greater buffer yard when that zoning district abuts residential development. And as you may recall, something I forgot to mention earlier, but as you may recall, we recently amended the Unified Development Code to be able to ensure that these additional setbacks provisions and that these buffer yard requirements provision, not only do they apply when it abuts a residential zoning district, but it also applies when it abuts a residential development when it's located in the ETJ. So these particular setbacks and buffer yard standards, should the zoning district be approved, would apply along that southern portion of that property and any other property line that it abuts residential development. And so some of the uses that, as you can see here, that are permitted in the industrial zoning district include emergency services station. You have some self-storage, you have small engine repair, office showroom, office warehousing types of uses. Some uses that are permitted with limitations, meaning that they have to comply with additional site design standards, include animal shelter, kennel, seasonal product sales, construction offices, and some uses that would require special use permit approval by the city council before that use can go on that property include a hospital, substance abuse clinic, major event entertainment, and so forth. And so staff reviewed the proposed request based on the approval criteria for a zoning map amendment, and we found that it partially complied with the approval criteria. Specifically, we found that we did have a complete application to be able to do a full analysis in accordance with our Unified Development Code and our comprehensive plan. We found that the zoning change was partially consistent with the comprehensive plan. As you may recall, the future land use designation for this property is regional center, which primarily encourages high retail, commercial types of uses with some supporting office warehouse uses within that center area. And so the C3 zoning district part of this request definitely complies with that future land use designation because that zoning district promotes and allows the same uses that are encouraged and envisioned in that regional center area. However, the industrial zoning district allows for more intense uses than what is actually envisioned in that regional centers area. The industrial zoning district does allow for certain uses like office warehouse, which is one of those serving and supporting uses that is encouraged by the regional center, but it can also allow other uses that are really high intense in nature and that may be considered to be more appropriate in a category like the employment center. However, staff does recognize that it appears that this whole area is transitioning. The development pattern that we're seeing in the area may be a little bit different than what was originally envisioned. And so I think the opportunity, should this rezoning request go through, I think there's an opportunity for us to go back and look at our future land use map and see if there's an opportunity for us to amend it and update it to go in line with the development pattern that we're seeing, as well as all the other industrial and business park uses that we are seeing surrounding this particular intersection. We also found that it partially complied with the criterion related to promoting the health, safety, or general welfare of the city and the safe, orderly, and healthful development of the city. And the reason for why we found it, that it did comply in the sense where we had general commercial zoning district proposed along the frontage road, where it is we want to see some of those commercial development activities. However, the amount of the industrial zoning district that's being proposed for this development and the fact that it immediately abuts an already established residential neighborhood, as there's no transition that's being proposed from that residential neighborhood onto the industrial property, that's where we found that it didn't comply with that orderly and healthful development. And so this is one of those situations where, just in light of the way that the zoning districts were being proposed on the property, and the size of the zoning districts, we found that it partially complied. We also found that it partially complied with a compatible zoning district and with the compatibility of the present zoning districts and conforming uses. And again, we found that it did comply because of this property does abut already an established industrial park. This property is located along 2 freeways and major roadways, which is where we want to see these high intense uses, which is where the high, uses of this nature is actually encouraged and should be located. You have a lot of commercial property along the I-35 frontage road. So in that case, it is compatible. However, because you have an abutting residential neighborhood, in that case, this type of a zoning district we found that it was not compatible with that particular use. And then we found that it did comply with the criteria related to the property being suitable for the uses permitted, the size of the property, the location of the property, the configuration of the property is definitely appropriate to be able to accommodate all the uses that are permitted in both the C3 as well as the industrial zoning district. And so in accordance with our code, about 89 property owners were notified of the request, as well as a notice was placed on the newspaper and signs were posted on the property. Today, we have received 0 comments in favor and 6 written comments in opposition to the request. I believe comments that we received after the agenda was posted have actually been forwarded on to the commission. In summary, this is a zoning map amendment request, as I mentioned, to rezone 85.7 acres from the agricultural district to the general commercial zoning district for only 7.6 acres and the industrial district for only 78 acres. And Sharon Commission, I apologize that I forgot to mention this in the morning, but Michaela Dollar, our Economic Development Director, is also present on the line, and she has a presentation for you as well following my presentation.
Okay. Does this conclude your presentation?
Yes, sir. This concludes my part.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have questions for Andreina at this point? Andreina, I'd like you to go back, please, to your complies, partially complies. Because I'm really surprised at some of this, so I need you to help me understand.
Yes, sir.
The partially complies, and let's go back and talk about the zoning change promotes the health, safety, or general welfare of the city. What is it that you saw that complied, and what did you see that did not comply?
So I'm going to go back to this exhibit right here. Okay. So where we found that it did comply, it was in the establishment of those zoning districts from the frontage road inward onto the property. And so because you are, establishing commercial zoning district along the frontage road, which is where we typically want to be able to see and encourage high intense commercial zoning districts. You also have part of this industrial zoning district, along the frontage of 130 tollway. Those types of intense commercial districts are intended to be located along major arterial roadways where you can have easy access. You are able to accommodate the traffic that it generates. So in those terms, we found that it complies. We also found that it complies where it actually comes in, again, from that I-35 frontage road, because you have property along the I-35 that are already zoned general commercial, or that have that mix of general commercial with industrial zoning district. And so you're going from that general commercial to the industrial. And so in that sense, we found that it did comply with that orderly development. Where we found that it did not comply with the orderly development is from the other side, particularly from the south portion of the property, where you have an established residential neighborhood. And so by you providing or establishing industrial zoning district immediately abutting single family residential, there is no transition in land uses, there's no transition in zoning, in the development. And so you may have two that are typically considered to be two incompatible land uses. Now, mind you, the development standards, the zoning standards of the industrial zoning district, such as the increase in setbacks, the increase in the buffer yard, definitely help mitigate the impact that this use may have on the residential neighborhood. However, from a zoning perspective, you don't have that transition of land uses. You don't have that transition in zoning district, which is typically something that we want to be able to see, going from, least intense to the most intense. So in that regards, we found that it did not comply.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from commissioners for Andreana?
Yes, this is Kayla McCord. Andreana, it appears to me that there are street stubs there on both Barberry and Dogwood that connect or that border the property in question. What is to prevent those stubs from being built through?
Absolutely. So, so in order to prevent them from being extended, one of the options that we have, that the Unified Development Code provides, is to be able to go through the subdivision variance process, to be able to waive or to deviate, I should say, from the requirement where those stubs would be required to be extended or for those trees to be terminated. So they would, that is an option that's afforded in the UDC, where they can request for that subdivision variance in order to be able to eliminate that sub.
But
Would that be a burden on the Crystal Knoll neighborhood?
Mm-mm.
That would be, so as it would be on this property, when as they develop and they go through the subdivision planning process, that is an option that they have available that they're able to do.
I see. Thank you.
So, but that's a subdivision process. That's not a zoning process.
Correct.
All right. Any other questions for Andreana? All right. Then we'll open the floor for Michaela. Welcome.
Hello, Mr. Bashir. It's good to see you, and thank you so much for having me this evening. I know it's a little unusual for me to come present directly to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but we thought in this instance it would be good to give the Commission a better understanding of the full picture of this type of project that we're working on, especially since the request is a little unusual with the abutting residential. So I thought it would be good to know, and I don't have a presentation per se, I've got some information just to provide for you. But I thought it would be good to know that the economic development staff have been working with Titan Development on potential industrial property in Georgetown since the beginning of this year. As it was identified in the 2018 Economic Development Strategic Plan, the biggest hurdle that we face in business recruitment and expansion is the lack of available space for businesses to go into and the lack of truly shovel-ready sites for development in Georgetown. Additionally, in the 2030 Comprehensive Plan, the proactive investment of infrastructure into specific areas to encourage targeted development was identified as a goal for the city. Our work with Titan is intended to advance Georgetown in both of these areas. Coming up very soon, you will see contracts with Titan Development and the city to partner on infrastructure that's necessary to create employment center development in Georgetown. While the majority of the infrastructure is focused on a different site than this one, the electricity that will be run to serve the site will also serve this one and requires easements across this property to be able to connect. Because of this, we are able to include the 85 acres that you're discussing tonight in the agreements that restrict certain uses that would traditionally be allowed by right in industrial, as well as require enhanced building standards. So the uses that they plan to restrict include things like recycling centers, slaughterhouses, dairy plants, concrete plants, auto recycling or wrecking yards, trailer parks, sewage treatment plants, and even mining on this site. Other uses in our industrial designation, such as manufacturing, processing and assembly, office showroom, warehouse distribution, and even medical offices, all align with our economic development strategic plan and match our targeted industries that we have of advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and professional services. While this site was designated for primarily commercial development, it is just not the likely scenario given the catastrophic hit that the retail industry has taken this year and was really already seeing prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. The development of Costco across the interstate from this site, we believe, will pull traditional development to the west side of 35, rather than the regional node that may have been envisioned in this area in the past. Should the Planning and Zoning Commission pass this zoning request this evening, we will work with the Planning Department to support a future land use map amendment that reflects this change in market demand and targets retail where it's more appropriate. So really our goal in partnership with Titan is to create a business park that attracts quality companies to Georgetown to provide employment for our residents and increase the commercial tax base for us. The activity we have seen in the market for primary businesses right now is really incredible despite the COVID-19 pandemic. And the pandemic has caused an increase in economic development activity because businesses across the world are working to ensure that they do not encounter a situation where their supply chain is disrupted or customer deliveries are delayed ever again. We've had an unbelievable amount of activity in this area that leads me to believe that a development such as this one would be very successful, especially given the parameters that they're going to be putting in place. So I appreciate your time this evening, and if you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, commissioners, questions for Michaela? I do have one request, and that is that one of the challenges with zoning property is that the grant of the zoning conveys a set of rights that sometimes are much broader than the current applicant intends for the actual use to grant, but the applicant goes away and the zoning remains. So at some point, there needs to be a more thorough presentation of what this park, if it's going to be a park, needs to look like. There needs to be a more thorough understanding with all the parties as to what this is. So just a personal observation here. So, okay. And thank you for your comments this evening, Michaela. Is the applicant present? Does the applicant have any comments?
Yes, the applicant is present, and we do have several comments. One is
Would you start by identifying yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Emiliano Guerrero, and I'm with Titan Development. I'm a senior developer with Titan Development. And I apologize, but we were under the impression we had sent over a few site plan, and we were under the impression it was going to be in the presentation. We'd just like to state that one, there's the natural flow of the topography on the site allows for the pond to be right adjacent. We are going to have a detention pond, obviously, for the impervious cover that we're doing. And it allows for the pond to be adjacent to the actual, oh, there it is. So the actual pond is adjacent to the neighborhood, the existing community. And the pond in its initial, or in our first few passes on design, has been at least 150 foot wide. So you're looking at a 150 foot regional detention pond, and I say regional as in regional for our 85 acres. Additionally, to the south of us, there's an existing industrial park, which has zero buffer, against the existing neighborhood. But we fully intend to have that large pond and a buffer next to the neighborhood, and do our best to landscape it and work with the community as best as possible.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right, commissioners, thank you.
Mr.
Chair.
I'm sorry, Marlene, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Marlene McMichael. I'm just curious. So, I mean, we have some residents that are pretty concerned, and so the city's sort of done a full court press to get this project done despite what the neighbors want. I'm slightly troubled by that. Is that pond, for example, going to be full of water? And what's the separation between the pond and the backyards of this neighborhood? And if it's not full of water, will it be maintained in a presentable way? I've seen ponds, detention ponds that are really just eyesores. So just to say it's a pond doesn't mean it's a pretty pond. So those are a couple of questions for one.
Yes, well, the pond is definitely going to be maintained. We put it on. We definitely have maintenance agreements, and each building requires a maintenance agreement, and we have to keep that pond functional. By right, no detention pond can hold water more than 24 hours. So it's not a wet pond in that it's not a pond that's going to be holding water at all times. It's a pond that slows the water down. We're required by law and by your code to detain to existing conditions. So we can't release any more water than is already being released. So the pond holds the water for a certain amount of time and releases it slowly so that there's no flooding downstream. But they're required to be gone. The water has to disperse within 24 hours.
Okay, thank you. Although the sketch in front of us is not part of the zoning application, it is useful to have an idea of what you are proposing out here. And I do want to ask you if I'm reading this correctly, the two streets that stub into this property, neither one of which are shown to be extended into this property. That will require you to come back if you were to build this application or proceed with an application in this configuration. Would that not require you to come back and request a subdivision variance?
No, those are private streets. I think the subdivision variance would come where she spoke earlier to the fact that we will not be tying into those existing streets. The existing streets in the neighborhoods will have to be shut off. We have no intention of tying into those. It's not a benefit for us, and it's definitely not a benefit for the community. So our plan is all the on-site streets are going to be, for the most part, private streets. But I think you are right. We will need that application to shut down those existing community streets.
I guess the reason I'm asking the question is to ensure the public that this is not a one and done deal, that before anything happens here, there's at least another public round of reviews and approvals of what's going through the process.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Each one of those buildings will be an independent plat typically. We may plat some of them together, but each one of those buildings you'll get to, the city will get to review the plats. Additionally, your engineering department, which we've talked to extensively, they get to review all our engineering diagrams, all our ponds, everything that goes into this development. But again, we typically plat each one of those buildings on its own. So it'll be its own independent plat, and each one will have to go through a platting process.
Okay, I appreciate the fact that the city will be involved heavily with this every step of the way. I just want to be sure the public understands that this is not their only chance to take a look at this project. Okay. All right. So we do have if there are no more questions for the applicant, we do have a public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. And at this point in time, I have a hand raised for James. Welcome. I'm not hearing you, James. So we'll come back to James. Let's start with Sal Perdomo. I hope I got that right.
Good evening, Chair. Yes, Sal Perdomo. I'm also with Titan Development and work with Emiliano, who just spoke. My address is 9601 McAllister Freeway, San Antonio, Texas, 78216. And again, my name is Sal Perdomo. I just wanted to elaborate on Emiliano's comments related to Commissioner McCord's concerns. This pond, as it's labeled in the site plan, will be a heavily landscaped buffer, and really shouldn't be labeled as necessarily a pond because it's just serving, as Emiliano mentioned, as 24-hour retention for drainage purposes, to prevent drainage going into the neighborhood to our south. So I just wanted to clarify that. It will be a 150-foot buffer, which, as we discussed earlier, is approximately 5 times greater than the required buffer per the zoning code. And if I could elaborate on just one additional point, Titan did send out 90 additional letters to the neighborhood per the list that was received from the planning department. In that letter, we did request the ability to meet with the neighborhoods if they so desired. We did not hear any comments from anyone in the Crystal Mill neighborhood. So I just wanted to point that out in showing that we did send out those letters. We are happy to meet with the neighborhoods if they wish between now and city council. And just wanted to elaborate on that point. So thank you guys for hearing this item, and we appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Sal. And next hand I see up is Mark Pettigrew. But before you start, Mark, James, I called on him first and we were unable to make a contact. I want to be sure that he has Nat Wagner's mobile phone number. He can call into Nat and see if we can get him connected in, and that number's 512-779-3531. 512-779-3531. All right, Mark, welcome.
Hello, my name is Mark Pettigrew. I'm at 300 Hickory Tree Drive. I have an email drafted to the planning department showing in Exhibit 6. And I do have several concerns with this new development, mainly with the virtual pond, mentioned being a retention pond. It's blackland clay back there, and water sits there for days and days after any rain. And as you can see, it's like 78 acres of runoff's going to come off that building. And if you've noticed the topography at all, I've lived in my house for 12 years here. The runoff runs directly towards our house. So it's going to be 78 acres of runoff running towards the subdivision. In Wisteria, we've already had multiple flooding problems. That's with soak-in from 78 acres of arable land. So in my opinion, that retention pond is nowhere near enough. I'm wondering where all the water's going to go. Like I said in my comment, like 35,000 gallons a minute approximately. So just wondering where the water's going to go. And also with the buildings overlooking my backyard, they're going to be 60 feet concrete buildings overlooking my backyard. I moved to Georgetown, not to make money, but to live in a beautiful place. And looking at that every day is not a particularly beautiful place. So hopefully you guys will take this into consideration, that we want to have Georgetown to be a nice place to live, but we also realize development does have to happen. But as everybody else says, hopefully not in my backyard. So also with the pond, the mosquitoes will be rampant. Obviously, I work for Williamson County, and the health department has been on it with preventing Zika virus recently, and this is going to be a prime habitat for mosquitoes right next to our families. So I hope you take all these items into consideration, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pettigrew. Let's see, James, are you back? Are you available?
Mr. Chair, I am on the phone with James. He does not currently have a microphone for his computer, and I'm recommending that he call into the meeting. So I'm giving him that number right now. If that fails, I'm going to recommend that he just chat his concern in the chat box here.
Did by any chance did he send in a written objection letter or written comments?
I do not believe so.
Okay.
What I understood from him.
All right, see if you can make the connection.
Okay, I will,
We're going to give you a couple of minutes here. Nat,
yes, sir.
is it possible that you can put him on your phone and let you hold your phone up to the
Hello.
microphone?
Hello, my name is Patricia.
Okay, just a second, please, just a second.
Sure, I will, give me 1 second. I'm gonna put my phone on mute.
Okay. So I'm seeing, Patricia, are you on the phone, on the chat here?
Hello, yes, my name is Patricia de Recarte. I live in 101 Wisteria Drive.
Okay, thank you. Welcome this evening.
Thank you, thank you. We are concerned about all this construction and everything. We moved here a year ago, so we was planning have a very, live in a very calm neighborhood. We moved from Round Rock to Georgetown looking that, and well, it was a surprise for us receive the news about this new construction, new zoning and everything. Our backyard is going directly with the limit of this area, new area that for the construction. So it's supposed to go directly to the pond, the supposed pond. We are concerned about the noises, also the mosquitoes, and the traffic also is going to be a nightmare. Big trucks moving around. Well, we are very concerned about that. Also for our kids, and I don't know. We see future problems with all this. That's my opinion. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you sharing that with us this evening.
Thank you.
Nat, how are we doing with James?
Yes, sir. Just spoke with James. He's monitoring. He is grateful that his neighbors are making comment right now. He's going to provide comment through the chat function. He's not able to call in right now.
Okay.
So he'll look for his next opportunity to participate.
Okay, well, okay. At this point, anyone else that would like to address the commission, now's the time to do so. I don't see any other hands that are up. Nat, one question for you. We have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks that have mailed in comments. How do those get into the record?
We will read those into the record. It's my understanding. We have a copy of those, and that we will read them aloud here tonight.
Okay, it's time to do so. Let's go ahead and do that, please.
Okay, I would ask Mirna has the copies of those, or Andreina have the copy of those to.
Just a second. Let me be sure that I have closed the public hearing. So I'm going to close the public hearing and ask you to now read those comments.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read them.
All right, thank you.
And I'll start out also by reading what James entered in the chat. He lives at 103 Wisteria Drive. He states that he is concerned with this. And I believe that's all we've received from him. And then the other comments that we've received. The first one is from Stephen Morley, 206 Hickory Tree Drive. I am writing to object to the request for zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 78.06 acres located at 2250 North IH 35, 2020-19-REZ from agriculture AG to industrial IN. My reasons for the objection are as follows. It is advised planning practice to zone adjacent plots of land with similar zoning labels to encourage a harmonious community. The land adjacent to the above plot of land is zoned residential. Zoning harmonious with residential would be residential, agriculture, or perhaps light commercial, but not industrial. 2. Industrial zones create unwanted noise pollution to populated areas. Future plans show large warehouses on the industrial site, which means large, loud semi-trucks with annoying reversing sirens blaring out all day, perhaps nighttime and weekends disturbing local residents. 3. According to stormwater runoff calculations, 78 acres of concrete will generate approximately 35,000 gallons per minute of runoff if there is 1 inch of rainfall in an hour. The topography shows that the runoff heads directly towards the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood. The future drainage plans look insufficient and could contribute to future flooding. 4. Industrial sites are plagued with trash. This trash will blow into the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood, forcing the residents to deal with the problem. 5. The proposed towering warehouses will be an unsightly blot on the landscape, obscuring beautiful views and potentially lowering home values. 6. The extensive construction of the site will be an inconvenient nuisance to the neighboring community with no direct benefits. 7. If the hedgerows are depleted or erased, then you will be impacting the local environment, regard migratory birds, and crucial wildlife, which is very dependent on each other's existence. I have enclosed some photos to give an example of the wildlife that is dependent upon these hedgerows. Behind the immediate fence line in the properties on Hickory Tree Drive, all of these pictures were taken in my backyard. I hope you carefully consider my reasons for objection and be considerate to the people of your local community before making any decision. The next one is from Kathy Gold. As a concerned resident of the Crystal Knoll Terrace subdivision, I'm sending this email. Apparently, notifications were only sent to residents in the Crystal Knoll Terrace subdivision whose property lines are directly affected by this proposal. However, this project can and will inadvertently affect the entire subdivision. Therefore, I am writing to object to the request for a zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 78.06 acres located at 2250 North IH 35, 2020-19-REZ from agriculture to industrial. My reasons for the objection are as follows. 1, it is advised planning practice to zone adjacent plots of land with similar zoning labels to encourage a harmonious community. The land adjacent to the above plot of land is zoned residential. Zoning harmonious with residential would be residential, agricultural, or perhaps light commercial, but not industrial. 2, industrial zones create unwanted noise pollution to populated areas. Future plans show large warehouses on the industrial site, which means large, loud semi-trucks with annoying reversing sirens blaring out all day, perhaps nighttime and weekends disturbing local residents. 3, according to stormwater runoff calculations, 78 acres of concrete will generate approximately 35,000 gallons per minute of runoff if there is 1 inch of rainfall in an hour. The topography shows that the runoff heads directly towards the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood. The future drainage plans look insufficient and could contribute to future flooding. 4, industrial sites are plagued with trash. This trash will blow into the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood, forcing the residents to deal with the problem. 5, the proposed towering warehouses will be an unsightly blot on the landscape, obscuring beautiful views and potentially lowering home values. 6, the extensive construction of the site will be an inconvenient nuisance to the neighboring community with no direct benefit. I hope you carefully consider my reasons for objection and be considerate to the people of your local community before making any decision. Thank you in advance for reviewing all input provided. The next one is from Tanner Job of 121 Dogwood Drive. To whom it may concern, I'm writing to object to the rezoning of land adjacent to Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood, project name 2250 North IH 35. As a homeowner and resident of Crystal Knoll Terrace, I believe rezoning this land from agricultural to industrial will have negative effects on the families living here. For the good of the citizens of this neighborhood and all of Georgetown, industrial development should be kept away from large neighborhoods and areas with dense population. Please do not rezone this plot for industrial use as it backs up right against our neighborhood. My formal objection letter is attached to this email. Thank you for your consideration. And he filled out a form which said, I object to the rezoning for industrial use and believe it will be a detriment to the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood. And the last comment received from Sorry Heart 107 Dogwood Drive. We object to the request for zoning map amendment to rezone approximately 78.06 acres located at 2250 North IH 35, 2020-19-REZ from agricultural to industrial. We live in the Crystal Knoll Terrace neighborhood and we don't want industrial influence bringing down our property value and our quality of life as a community. Industrial zoning will only lead to unsightly development that will include noise, trash, and traffic. Please hold meetings so that we can protest in person. And that's all I have.
Just a second, you actually received one more, which was from Johnny Billingsley, but it is the same form letter as you've already read into the record, and his address is 204 Barbary. So that one you've sent out earlier. So if you'll find that, make sure it's part of the record as well. I appreciate it. Okay, commissioners, this item's moved to us. What is your recommendation to the city council?
Ursula, it's Jay, and I move that we accept as presented by staff.
So a motion to approve the rezoning request as presented by staff by Commissioner Warren. Is there a second to that motion? Well, I'm going to second it just so we have a discussion. So let's start, commissioners, with anybody want to start this process? If not, I'll start calling on you for your thoughts and comments.
This is Kayla McCord. Mr. Chairman, I share your concern regarding the basic industrial zoning should this applicant not follow through with this project. I'm reasonably confident that they would make sure that these concerns are taken care of, but specifically, I would be concerned about drainage issues, the depth of the setback, and buffer yard relative to a maximum 60-foot building height. If we simply rezone, or if it's simply rezoned, because I feel like that building height's a little excessive right next to a residential area. So I don't know, I'd be a lot more comfortable if this was a request for a PUD, but obviously it is not. So those are my concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Any other commissioners with comments?
Well, I'll comment on why I'm motion that we approve it, and that the location of the property, I mean, whether this particular plan goes through or not, it's not ag land, it's not single family residential, it is commercial land. It is going to be and needs to be developed as commercial. And this plan or some other plan, at some point in time, it's going to be commercially developed. And it's got industrial right next door to it. It's got future land use around and beside it, and it's abutting 2 state highways. That's what that land is best used for. That's the best use for the land is commercial industrial usage.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Other commissioners with comments?
Yeah, Ursula, this is Sheree. I just need to go ahead and lean in here. I certainly understand the potential use of this property, but moving from commercial to industrial, seems a little excessive. The building height concerns me. The lack of what I would consider a buffer between this industrial site and the neighborhood, I find concerning. It would have been nice to see, I don't know, a little bit more of a robust view of the use of this property. I don't feel that the city and the engineering firm spent the time to work with the neighborhood. I find it a little concerning, to be quite frank.
Okay, thank you. Travis, do you have any comments?
My thought process on it is, I'm somewhere in between where Jay and Kayla and everybody else is. I think, I totally understand that property is going to be a probably heavy commercial use. I wish that this would have come in as a PUD or had some sort of multi-zoning component to it, so you don't end up with that industrial right next to that neighborhood, and maybe have some sort of transitional use, lower use there. I don't think that serves well to have that heavy of a use right next there. I understand the southwest portion of that backs up to the industrial park that's been there for a long time, and there's some of those houses that back up to industrial, but we've got a chance to not recreate that here, I think.
Okay, thank you. Marlene?
Well, I would agree with Jay that I think this is going to have a commercial use at some point. But I also agree with Cherie that I'm not sure if the city is genuinely interested in development of commercial and industrial property, then I think it's incumbent upon the city to work with the homeowners in the area. I've seen plenty of detention ponds. I have them in my own neighborhood where they're not, the intent in the beginning was to maintain them, and then they didn't, and they became exactly as described, mosquito harvesting areas, to the homeowners who have to deal with it. And so I'm concerned about the heavy industrial directly adjacent to the homeowners, and the fact that there hasn't been a better effort at addressing their concerns. And on the other hand, I do recognize this property at its location, and I've gone back and looked at the maps. It is going to be in commercial. So I understand that, but I think we put the cart before the horse on this one.
Okay, I appreciate your comments, and let me just give you my thoughts on it. I've really wrestled with this one because I do think that this would have been better presented as a PUD, simply because it would have been more detail provided. That detail would have been valuable to all the parties that participate in this process. And it may have very well alleviated some of the concerns of the neighborhood. I think that this parcel cannot escape its destiny. It is one of the very few parcels in Georgetown that actually has exposure and frontage on two major thoroughfares. I mean, you got 130,000 cars a day coming up I-35 out there. And I think it's not inconceivable that some point in the future, 130 is going to get somewhere close to half of that. So you got a couple of 100,000 vehicles a day running by there. It's not it's not, to my mind, it's not a good residential location. I wish I knew when the general commercial market was going to rebound from COVID, but you know, the retail sector is taking a bloodbath right now, and the area where we do see growth and is in the industrial use. So I thought about what does this mean to have an industrial structure here, and I honestly can't tell you that. You can go into industrial parks, and there are some that have a lot of traffic. There are some that don't have much traffic at all. We don't know what the users are here, but you could have a C3 zoning on this land, and have a Costco or HEB, and I guarantee you they have trucks coming at all hours, and a lot of traffic. That doesn't mean that the concern over traffic should be minimized. I'm not, you know, I would be questioning, how do you protect me from that? I think the pond is the best separation that you can get, provided that it's maintained. And what we have are promise that it's going to happen, but I don't know how you codify that. My sense is that this application is appropriate. I wish that we had better tools available to address these concerns, but those are really not zoning questions. They are things that come up during the site development permitting process, the subdivision planning process. And I think the applicant has heard the concerns. And, you know, at this point, we're to make a recommendation to the city council. The ultimate decision about what's going to happen on this property lies with the city council. And I can only encourage the applicant to get with the neighbors and to have that conversation before they walk up, and this becomes a matter that can go up or down based on the council vote. So I appreciate everybody's comments on that. If anybody has any other comments, now's the time for you, commission, from the commissioners, any other comments. Now's the time to make them, and if not, I'm going to call the question. Okay, Myrna, call the question, please.
Cherie Heinsman,
No.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
No.
Travis Perthius,
No.
Jay Warren,
Yes.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes. So we have a 3-3 vote. This with Commissioner Albright absent. So this will go to the council with a notice that it is a tie vote. All right, that takes us to item V. And that is discussion items. Nat, any, or Andreina, any updates or announcements from the staff?
No, sir, no announcements.
Okay. Updates from boards and commission meetings. The only update I have for you is that the mobility bond committee application is moving towards a final list of roadway projects to carry out to the public for discussion. That's all going to happen over the course of the next 2 weeks, actually. So there'll be more for you as they come up. Any alternate members who have questions or comments about any agenda items this evening? Okay, just a reminder that the November 17th teleconference Planning and Zoning Commission meeting will be starting at 6 p.m. And before we quit, I had Myrna conduct just a poll to see if commissioners would be willing to start Planning and Zoning Commission meetings earlier, say 5:30, and we could do that after the first of the year. We simply have noticing items there, but we need to have a formal motion to make that change, Andrea.
So, Commissioners, just to make sure I understand, we're talking about the time change, correct?
Correct. To start meetings at 5:30 instead of at 6 o'clock.
Correct. So as you may recall, at the beginning of every term, the Planning and Zoning Commission needs to take action on when the regular meeting date, time, and location is going to be. And so at the beginning of the next term, which should be around the March timeframe, the Planning and Zoning Commission can consider that and make it as part of their motion and the approval as to when that regular time meeting, both the days, the hour, and the location will take place.
Okay, that's fine. March is early enough to take care of that as far as I'm concerned. Okay. All right, then I need a motion to adjourn.
This is
Hey, I'll move that we adjourn.
Was that Jay?
Sir.
Okay, a second?
Second, Kayla McCord.
Kayla, okay. Call the roll quickly, Myrna.
Cherie Heinzman,
Yes.
Kayla McCord,
Yes.
Marlene McMichael,
Yes.
Travis Berthius,
Yes.
Jay Warren,
Yes, ma'am.
Ursula Brashear.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. 8:07, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Ursula. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks and good night.